the reason why I say it this way is because we don't have good choices on the ballot. We don't have these incredible women and folks who are here also at this candidate forum. It's not common yet to see folks like us on the ballot, and I think that's one piece of this that's really important. To see a mom, to see queer, Black, Latina women on the ballot is really essential. We also need more language access in the process of registering to vote. I can't tell you the number of times I've been on the street talking to a señora or someone in the community who's like, I heard about municipal voting, can I vote in this election? I'm like, not this one, maybe 2024, we'll see if we can get what we did at the city level, at the state level. But even the process of finding applications to vote in other languages is really challenging. And so that's one piece. It's just about funding the kind of language access we want to see across state agencies and making sure that we're doing that as well, and how we prepare people, educate folks how to participate, how to run for state committee, for district leader, for a number of different positions where the process and the structure to vote is decided.
The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the problem of food insecurity in our city. In your candidate information form, you stated that addressing hunger would be one of your top legislative priorities after taking office, emphasizing a need for a better food system and progressive tax incentives for small businesses participating in mutual aid efforts. Could you elaborate on what legislative measures you would take to help small businesses that impact food security in your district?
Thrive New York is one step, right? One step forward. I think it's also essential to acknowledge that there's this myth of scarcity, that there's not enough food, there aren't enough resources. There's so much farmland and agriculture in our state. We are an agricultural powerhouse in New York. So there's no reason why folks in the Bronx who are hungry can't access that produce. Hunts Point Produce Market is just miles away from our district, and I've personally driven a U-Haul many times to go pick up that produce, thanks to the gracious folks who are willing to donate stuff for us to redistribute to our community members. But when I talk about progressive tax incentives, I'm talking about the responses I get from folks like Moss Cafe or Cloudy's, these women-owned businesses in our district who have done incredible work to start CSA programs for folks, but who will also open their doors to make sure that the community fridges have a resource and a hub to do this organizing work. So at this moment in time, I don't have an idea of what that bill looks like, but I want us to get together and talk about what that what that plan could look like. What are the ways in which we can make sure that minority and women-owned businesses are able to access grant funding like restaurant resiliency funds, again, language access, because I can tell you the number of Dominican-owned restaurants, Mexican-owned restaurants in our communities where perhaps the owner doesn't speak English confidently enough to go through the bureaucracy of applying for these grant programs. And then instead, the money goes to Food Bank for New York, these larger nonprofits that have connections, leaving our communities out of the process of feeding folks.
Inaccessible subways make it difficult, sometimes impossible, for New Yorkers who are disabled, elderly, or who have young children to get around. How do you propose we fund the much-needed improvements for accessibility for our public transit system without increasing the fare cost for New Yorkers?
Well, we could start by not giving billionaires money for stadiums and actually funding the MTA. That's number one. Number two is there's a lot of Biden money coming into New York State. How are we spending that infrastructure money to make sure that in the Northwest Bronx, where we literally have one elevator accessible station across the one train, so we got 242nd all the way down to 225th. If that elevator isn't working, if you are an elderly person, if you have a stroller, if you are someone who cannot go up the absurd amount of steps to get to the top of the platform, bless you. That is an issue that in New York State, a wealthy state where we have the means, we have the resources, but not the political will to actually fight for that funding to be spent and dispersed equitably so that people who rely on public transit are healthcare workers, daycare workers, teachers, people who just need to get to an appointment. And I can tell you from my experience with my grandma, she's an elderly Dominican woman, but she will only go to Washington Heights for the things that she wants to get.
And that is very common for a lot of folks who come from other countries, different communities, where this is like, I need to be able to be connected to my folks. And we're preventing people from thriving, from supporting these local small businesses that are run by a number of immigrants. And I want to make sure that when you swipe your Metro card, you're able to get where you need to go with dignity and with ease. And the way that we do that is to make sure that that money that is coming into the state from the federal government, we're fighting to make sure that we're actually making our stations accessible.
You plan to fight for fair pay for home care so that care workers receive a livable wage. There is currently a bill in the state legislature to enact this policy, which would create minimum wages for home care aides. If elected, what additional policies will you propose to protect the labor rights of our home health aides?
So this one's personally really important to me because my grandma was a home health aide for decades. I saw how she struggled for years to take care of our family. Now she's retired and she lives on Medicaid and Social Security. And so whatever else we're able to put together as a family, and that's not good enough. There are too many women of color who care for our seniors. We are in the midst of a crisis, a workforce crisis right now. So what we need to do, we need a new deal for CUNY and for SUNY to make sure that we are investing in the future professionals who are going to provide that care that is some of the hardest work I can possibly imagine. I watched my grandma, on those days where my mom couldn't afford childcare and I had to go to work with her. I saw the things that she did. Helping an elderly person bathe, helping this person feel love and compassion and dignity. These are really important things that we need to affirm as important work that deserves much higher wages. I also am concerned about the mental health of the number of healthcare providers, particularly home health aides. You're working a 20-plus hour day and you come home. At the end of that day, how much of yourself do you have left for you? Right, and so I'm thinking about retirement for healthcare workers. I'm also thinking about the mental health of our healthcare workers and the ways in which we provide that dignity care that they provide for folks to make sure that, like my grandma, she doesn't have to struggle, she doesn't have to worry about her life.
Thank you. So this is your last question. You have 2 minutes now, so a little bit more time. You now have the opportunity to speak about a policy issue of your choice that the previous questions did not give you the chance to highlight.
So, my senior, trigger warning for folks, my senior year of college, I was sexually assaulted. And the worst part of the process of coming forward was what happened in response to my coming forward. It actually even wasn't being raised, because I can barely remember it because I was intoxicated at the time. I'm in a much different place now, shout out to mental health and good therapists out there. If you don't have one, you gotta make sure that you can get some. But I want to talk about how hard folks have been fighting for years, since 2019, when the voluntary intoxication loophole was first introduced in the Senate and the Assembly. It passed the Senate and it's still in the Assembly. And you know where it's sitting? It's sitting in Codes Committee. You know who the chair of Codes is? Jeff Dinowitz, my opponent. For 28 years, men like Jeff have been in charge and calling the shots for women like me in the community without actually listening to what we have to say. I'm over it, I'm sick of it, and when I get to Albany, we're closing the damn loophole.
Thank you, Jessica. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you.